Ronnie Velasquez, city council member, sign down and put board member. You could put both of them over there with you.
Board member today.
Good morning. On behalf of the Parks and Downtown Improvement Corporation, I'd like to officially call this meeting to order and ask Mr. Jackson to ask our invocation.
Amen. We bow our head. Heavenly Father, we come today to say thank you. Father, we ask you to continue to bless this board and continue to bless the city of Turtle. Those that are involved in decision making, let it be guided in your direction. Father, we ask you to keep us safe from all harm and danger. Keep us safe from the coronavirus. And Father, we ask that you just continue to bless the city of Turtle in all their officials. And bless everyone that sits on this committee. All these we ask in our son Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Before you, you have the minutes from the November 12th meeting. Once you've had a chance to review those, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we accept the minutes.
Thank you, JC. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Hillary. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I'm excited to see so many guests here today. It confirms my suspicion that there's exciting things happening on this board and in this community. So we welcome all of you. We've been meeting for a little over a year now, and I feel like we've just been meeting. But we're starting to spend a little money. We're starting to borrow a little bit of money and starting to talk about some things that are going to make an impact in this town for generations to come. And I'm feeling you all feel the same way. So thank you for taking time out at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, which is when Mike insists we meet, to be here. All right. At this time, we're going to start out new business by discussing the Town Square project. Mr. Sims?
So, President and Board, I will tell you that the idea behind today's meeting is to go through what I would call three of the major projects that all really need to get linked up together and need to be understood together. It's very nice to be able to talk openly about the Town Square project, and frankly, it's one of those things where we did a lot of this work at the City Council level in executive session because there's some very big land implications to the Town Square project. But not to steal Chris and Mike's thunder here, but we are already out with offers on land associated with this project. And so we're a little bit more free to talk about it because some of the landowners who are being impacted by it have gotten those initial offer letters associated with this project. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about South Alley. We'll talk about the Quiet Zone and Complete Streets combined project. We've got quite a few very smart people here in the room. And I'm going to let them each introduce themselves all in turn, but I will tell you that we're not trying to do this as a, gee, how smart is staff? We don't want to try to pull that off, right? And I'm reminded that sometimes you want to do a series of projects and you want to bring in the best to help you pull a project out and get it designed, coordinated, and implemented correctly. Because it's one thing to talk about big grand vision, and it's another thing to be able to build it. And what we're working on here is not to talk about stuff, but it's to build stuff and get stuff done in a manner where, whether it's 10 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever it might be, when you walk on US 80, Virginia, South Alley, Adelaide, Francis, Grove, all of those streets, Newton, when you find yourself standing at what used to be the corner of College and Catherine, and you don't find yourself in the middle of a street intersection, you find yourself in the middle of a park, we want it built right. And a lot of what you're going to hear today is really the big level stuff that then all of these engineers that you're meeting today can then turn around and make into projects that go to let, more borrowing to be done, and major construction projects. So that's my intro for you. I have to also say, I incorrectly said that your nameplate said council member. It actually says Mayor Pro Tem. because Ms. Velasquez was recently named Mayor Pro Tem. So I will bring that up as well. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mike. Are you going to intro for? Very good.
I'm starting
Awesome.
off. Your eggs are getting cold.
I know. Yeah.
Madam President, Board, thank you for the morning here to present. Key word you said, impact. I think what you're going to hear, not only from us, but from the other consultants, is a lot of impact for the city of Terrell. We're pleased to be a part of the projects that are here for you guys. And just for introduction, my name is Mike Burns. I'm a vice president with KSA. I've been working with the city of Terrell for 20 years. 2001, I did my first project with you guys out at the airport. And since then, it's been a variety of different municipal projects for the city over those years. KSA provided the comprehensive plan. In 2016, 2017, we were working on the city's comprehensive plan, and a big component of that plan, and many of you may have been on the citizens, the meetings that we had, get input from citizens on that comprehensive plan, and the big part of that plan was the downtown plan. And that was the impetus that kind of started this through the projects. Before I should have done this, which button do I need for?
Left arrow and the right arrow.
There it is, Downtown Plan, 2017. That's what this document is. And it started the process of rethinking, retooling, reinventing your downtown for the city of Terrell. As you know, as you're aware, if you're on this board, how important downtowns are for communities, especially around the Metroplex. As you see other communities doing what they're doing with their downtowns, Terrell needed to know they needed to go from a linear, high-traffic downtown to something else. And the process has been going on for over a year to develop that. You'll see the wording here is that the downtown is your heart for your community. It says a lot about who you are, and we want to continue to make that a big, important process as we plan, develop, design, and then start constructing that it fits the city of Terrell for what you need. We started about a year ago with your city manager, Mike Sims, developing what we're calling the project area, which is south of the railroad, south of Moore Avenue, and it's in that red box is our study area for a downtown location. That would be a place for, and I'm gonna steal some of Chris's thunder here for what he's gonna do. It's a place that's gonna draw people, not only your own citizens, but people from all around the community, the area, to come and participate, to do business, to recreate, to live in this area of city of Terrell. I'm gonna introduce our planner. He's got the next slides and the next slides in the project. I'll introduce you. I'll throw you under the bus. Chris Basham is our senior planner at KSA. He is also our lead for our federal development work for KSA. He has a previous career as a Air Force, retired from the Air Force, service-disabled vet. He's a weird dude because he's a licensed architect. He's a fellow with the American Institute of Certified Planners. He is a horse trader and farmer. He just has too much on his plate, but he lives for this sort of stuff. So I'm just let Chris have it from here and do your thing.
Let me crawl out from under this bus here. Hey, thank you. I am excited about this project. As Mike was saying, what we're looking to do is a new town square. Well, what is that? And so we started this whole process with trying to define what that is. One of the things that I went back to as a planner, as an architect, there was a group of architects and planners that did a worldwide evaluation and research on what things keep reoccurring on parks and what makes something a place. And the book was called A Pattern Language. by Christopher Alexander and several other architects, but they went worldwide, and they identified over 200 patterns, or things that keep repeating themselves that are successful in parks and downtown developments around the world in all cultures. So we have taken some of those ideas and incorporated those and calling them seeds right now. Seeds because they have to be planted and nurtured and executed as you go forward. So as we looked at alternatives for the downtown plan, we brought in a bunch of those seeds. We are carrying them forward, and the hope is in the long term that the downtown development and the square development will not just be a city effort, but it'll be a community effort that also involves private developers. And so we wanted to carry those ideas forward too, so that all of those seeds that we've said we want to plant it in the town square get planted by everybody that's touching the park. Why are we doing this? We're trying to inspire community development, community involvement, community growth, and of course, community excitement. Task 1 report is completed, and that's where we went through several alternatives. We did an inventory analysis that looked at the downtown area and compared it with other places, and we're trying to create a new heart, if you would, for the whole downtown area. We also did some preliminary look at historical perspective. Texas is real big about having town squares and, you know, the county courthouse sitting in the middle of a downtown square. What does that do? What does that create? We understand that now. What are the other options out there? We looked at several development options. You're going to see 7 of the early ones that were just kind of laid out and talked about and understood. But why we're doing this is because you're in a competitive environment. Dallas is growing. Rockwall is just taking off right now, and we know we want to steal some of that work and bring it here. And you know, Rockwell is going to get developed and it's on its way, but they're going to run out of space, and Terrell's in a perfect place to create that and keep going. It'll become a community identity, a marker, a brand for the community, even more so than Terrell is now. We also want it to be a place that brings the community together. It becomes a point that everybody talks about in Terrell. It's an event center, a recreational hub. As all of that, it also creates economic development. We want developers to want to be near or in the park too. So that's a big thing of what we're trying to do here. That it becomes an instigator and an incubator, if you would, for development in the area. And obviously to become a destination point, that people are coming to Terrell because they've heard about all the great things that are going on in Terrell. And by the way, it's a great place to live, so y'all come on. I threw in here Daniel Burnham, who was an architect and a city planner back in 1910, and this is just, you probably heard pieces of it, make no small plans. The rest of that is, for they have no magic to stir men's souls, and probably themselves won't be realized. In other words, if you get the right idea, it'll grow itself, and everybody else will pick it up and grow with it, and that's kind of what we're looking to do here. These were just a couple of samplings that we looked at, and we looked at smaller ones, bigger ones, but you can kind of see that we looked at a lot of different ideas and talked about the pros and the cons. You see the circles at the top. We're looking at entry points. Where do you enter this park? And is it just one entry point? And it's not. It's going to be several. There'll be primary entry points and secondary entry points. They could be themed. We're also looking at where do we put city facilities around this park, because that was one of the things that was given to us as guidance, is we need places so that as the city grows, city facilities also grow and are centered around that. One of the neat things that we did is we had the opportunity when the city council attended the Municipal League in Houston a few months ago to actually set up a tour and go visit some downtown parks in the Houston area. We went to the McGovern Centennial Parks. We went to Rice University, which was kind of a sterile park, which you see the picture on the right bottom. That's actually at Rice University. Very, very geometric, very organized, very low maintenance, which is one of the things that we looked at also. And we also went and looked at the Sugarland Town Square, which is primarily super, super commercial. A very small park, but a lot of commercial activity going around it. And so the idea was, how do we incorporate those things? The other thing that we did when we went through those parks is we went back to those seeds that I talked about earlier, and identified those seeds in those areas and show how they actually work and how they were applied in these 3 parks. The selected plan is this one you see here, and this is just a rough sketch, but the park is basically 8 city blocks south of the railroad, completely lined with buildings and with a central green park that has multiple uses. One of those patterns, one of those seeds that I mentioned before is a promenade. Almost every park or downtown has a place where there's a central walking place that people will walk, and they do that to see and to be seen. I mean, it's a thing that occurs around the world, that promenade. So we've got the promenade in there. There's several others that I won't get into here today, but this was the general concept, that it would be around a green space and that city development. What is that development in those gray buildings around there? It could be several things. It could be mixed use. It could be government facilities up top. It could be commercial on the bottom, residential. We looked at a lot of different possibilities. All of those have revenue implications also. We also looked at what happens around the park. When you get something like this, people are going to want to be near it. So when you see the private redevelopment opportunities that are identified around it, we also took into account where are all these people going to park. So we actually did a parking analysis too, is how much parking would be needed for ultimate build out of this park, depending upon what's going to be there, and identified places where there could be surface parking, or if needed, multi-level parking. But this was just the original base concept that we're looking to develop and go forward. All of these other presentations you're going to see today will also help develop and build upon this as pieces of the whole big downtown development. What's next? We've got this thing broken down into about a 15-year increment because it takes time to build this. The city council approved the proposed siding, which was the plan you just saw, this one here. Maybe not. Won't go back. Okay, we'll just leave it. That's okay. No, that's fine. Those 8 city blocks as the core of that downtown development. As Mike mentioned, they've already started acquiring the land, and there's several parcels that would be built to buy those 8 acres, bought to build those 8 acres of development. We're in the process right now of doing an infrastructure assessment, depending upon what the park wants to be and can be. We're trying to set up the flexibility of the infrastructure being available for that development. And it may come in phases as this thing goes forward, but understanding what's there and what needs to be there is all part of that. Where we're at next is that we'll be talking with, okay, what's the next step as far as what is the park going to look like? Where does it start? And that's the next step we're on right now. What is the next step after the land acquisition? What's the next thing that we plant that starts to grow? We're also looking at creating standards. As I said before, the only way this goes on is for there to be some standards that whoever works on the park, whether it be the city, whether it be a private developer, whether it be a commercial interest, there needs to be some standards so everybody stays within the realms of that vision of what you're looking to have there. So we need to do that. We also are starting the first building that will go down there. Let's really get this started. And what we're looking at right now is probably a library, community center, senior center, which is really needed in the community. That would probably be an anchor facility somewhere around the park in one of those squares, one of those gray buildings that you saw. And we also would start the community outreach. I mean, right now, this going from the city council to the PADIC, at some point, we're gonna roll in the community as a whole so that everybody gets to play into what this needs to be and wants to be. Goes on to the 510. We're also looking for public-private partnering opportunities. Again, the city provides this much and the commercial developer comes in and does this. Again, according to some, standards that makes this thing go forward. But that continues on all the way from 10 years. So bottom line, what's it gonna take? It's gonna take a community-supported vision, and that's kind of the point we're trying to get to right now, develop that, and a champion. The thing doesn't move by itself. It's gonna take a champion, whether that's you guys or the city council or some member of the community. Somebody needs to, our group needs to push this thing to keep it going and sell it and get community buy-in. It also takes an executable master plan. And that's kind of what I think, everything that Mike Sims has got going on right now with all these groups that you're gonna hear from today, is what is the plan? How do we get there? And each one of them has an execution and a strategy, so that you can get to where you're trying to do. It takes community investment. It's not, investment is not just money. It's the spirit of the community and the ideas of people to put it in place to make this thing happen. And lastly, it takes time. And we really wanted to emphasize that this doesn't happen overnight. Central Park in New York, everybody knows about, that was a 15-year endeavor to get that thing built. And then more currently and more recently and more closely to here, Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, that was an 8-year process to get to that. And now they're expanding it too. I just saw the other day where they're gonna be expanding it, almost doubling the size of it. So they've got probably another 8 years to doing that too. So, but that's basically what we've got here today as far as the park. We're very excited about it. I'm super excited about the other two guys that you're gonna hear from today, because all of this ties together and it really shows that the community is really focused on making this thing happen. So if you got any questions, I don't know if you want to do those now or later or whatever. So.
No, questions would be great right now if the board has any. Can you flip back to the map?
Any questions for Mr. Basham?
His presentation was perfect.
It was perfect.
Anybody?
My burning question is, either currently, or we could even say a year from now, what percentage of the land acquisition will be complete?
So, in late November, early December, the city of Terrell hired Heinecker Land Services. Heinecker Land Services is the same company TxDOT would hire to buy right away for, a major new interstate road, right? So they're the big boys, and they are under contract with us. We have a professional service agreement with them. Charles Fenner is not only our municipal development director, he also serves as our real estate director. So he is working with them basically every day to double check where they stand. You have a lot of steps you have to do all of this correctly to maintain viability for federal and state grants in the future, which of course we want to do. And I would say that if I'm going to be optimistic and not worry about things like a worldwide pandemic slowing us down, that we can do it in a year. Because there are a lot of steps with notices, and you got to give landowners their fair shake and their fair amount of time. But I'm comfortable saying that the park part of this that you see here is a one-year timetable. Things outside of our control that will be a little bit more difficult. Some of that land in red you can readily see is Union Pacific-owned land. I'll tell you that probably 18 months or so ago, Charles started the process of trying to get Union Pacific to sell us those parcels downtown that are so key for us. And it has taken congressional involvement from a man named Gooden that you might know. And it has taken a lot of work to get them to finally start running our offers through their approval process. And so I think we've made it through maybe 2 of 75 hurdles, but Charles will keep working on it, and we'll hope to get there. That's outside of our control, but we don't actually need that land to build the buildings, right? We just need that land for the parking, and so maybe that'll be a little bit easier. I'm also very mindful of budget issues. So we did borrow a large amount of money this summer at the city council level, and we're using that money to walk through this acquisition process. So we're not going to guarantee every single bit of parking shown on the plan until we methodically kind of work through the process of saying, okay, that really cost this dollar amount, so we can afford to buy this much land for parking. But I'm very confident to say the town square part, the park part of it, the municipal buildings, all the blue building part of it, I think we can get that done before this time next year. Mm-hmm.
Just one more question, and maybe this is a question for consultants, but I'm assuming that the bottom center kind of focal point of that park is that community center that we're talking about.
Well, I would say I want to take a deep breath and let let us get some community input on that. I think that I would like to walk into it without a preconceived notion of exactly where to put which civic facility. I think I want Chris to do some more work in thinking on that. We have a library consultant that you guys have not met, Maureen Art, who's done the Seguin Library and probably 10 or 15 other libraries in Texas. And you'll get to meet her during this process. Councilwoman has already had a presentation from her. She'll blow you away. And I need her giving us input on where to put the facility as well. So there's a lot more brain power to go into it. I guess what I would say is think of those blocks as just what they're shown. They're just building footprints. And we'll work through the process of saying, well, how much of the first floor should be this use? How much of the second floor should be this use? Will we need to use the second floor, the third floor for parking on any of this, you know? So we've got lots and lots of questions. Will any of these be co-development opportunities where we have somebody come in and say, hey, I'd like to put some apartments on the 4th and 5th floors of that thing? Well, that'll change the equation. We'll have to work through that process if we end up having a development partner on any of it. So lots to be decided. The point I wanted to make is to say we put this little flag here because there's some guys here interested in having a British museum in downtown, and that'll be one of the very first projects we do. So you're not really getting a briefing on that today, but it's an example of how all of this needs to stitch together, right? I ought to be able to walk out of the 4th floor of the future British Museum, and on the north side of it, look at a wonderful Moore Avenue, right? And I ought to be able to look back and forth and look over the American National Bank building, and I ought to be able to see some great stuff in our downtown. I ought to be able to go to the south side of it. I ought to be able to open a door and stand on the balcony on the 4th floor of it, and I ought to be able to look across a south alley that doesn't look like junk. I ought to be able to look across a railroad track, and I ought to be able to be proud of what I see when I'm looking at this new development, okay? And so that's just an example of how all of these projects rely on one another. So I'll stop talking there and let you move to the next item, if that's okay.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Basham? I'll just emphasize the word champion you used, and, you know, unless I sense any heartache from this group, I hope we'll all be champions for this cause. It's a huge part of why we're here and what we're doing, and so you can count on us for that.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So the next one is the South Alley project overview. I'm going to give one PowerPoint slide, and then I'm going to let a awesome planner come up and give you a presentation about South Alley ideas. So here's where we stand on South Alley. We have a Texas Water Development Board loan to complete the water, sewer, and pavement from Rockwall Street to Delphine Street in the South Alley. We've estimated that cost as a base cost of $1.8 million. And so what does that exclude when I say base cost? That means no overhead utility relocation. I don't get to take the power lines down, and no complete street elements. So everything that Rick's going to talk about here in just a second, we can't afford because we only planned for a $1.8 million project. And we need to figure out how to have the money to put the utility lines down and how to have the money to do the complete street elements of this. So the design of the project's on hold due to some encroachment review issues by Union Pacific Railroad. When you're building public infrastructure right next door to them, they're very insistent that they get to review every little thing, and we've sent various things to them. We've got lots of problems, frankly, with being behind trailer furniture because the trailer furniture storage building is the thing that's most in the wrong place. And we've done what I would say is an enormous amount of work to make sure we don't have to knock down a building that's behind trailer furniture, right? So that's our tightest point and the biggest squeeze for South Alley in that little zone. And that was a major part of that encroachment review. And I think we're going to get through that process in the next couple of months. There is an overhead utility relocation planning is currently underway. Me and Steve Rogers and Charles were just looking at a set of plans that show from an engineering firm called Robinette how to take the utility lines and drop them from kind of, sort of, what you might think of as being the old Bass Rutledge building, where the karate studio is now, right on Francis, to drop them there and keep them underground all the way over to vaguely where Cowboys is now. And so that's a big drop of utility lines. That's a multi-$100,000 project, but we do have a schematic that shows how that can be done. And of course, that really changes your appearance of the South Alley. Mr. Rick over here has completed his report. He's going to show it to you, and we want your input about the things that you love most out of his plan so that we can look at that. Schoenberg and Polk, which is our local engineering firm that's over right off the South Alley in the old railroad depot. They're tasked with creating a total project cost estimate combining all of this. So exciting stuff like where do the dumpsters go? That's part of it. And SPI will have to stitch all of that together and figure out how to plan that to make sure it gets done right. So then our goal is sometime over the next few months, bring to you a cost proposal and just basically ask you how much you want to invest in the South Alley. And I don't want you to try to guess that dollar amount right now, but let's let Rick do some work and let Frank Stevens do some work and figure out what parts of that we need to do. It is in your initial capital plan. It was listed as one of the immediate action projects. And I will tell you that the City Council is also interested in putting some of its own money into different parts of this. And so we're not trying to hang you guys out to dry all on your little lonesome. The City Council is also looking for, well, how should we use some of the bond program funds that we borrowed to invest in the South Alley? So with that, Rick, take it away.
Thank you. Mike spoke so generously of me, so I appreciate that. I think I've at least presented before or talked to everybody here, if I'm correct. So I'm Rick Adamski. I don't need to get into all the introductions. But my firm, Ash and Lime, has been working in this region. We're Dallas-based. We've been working in this region since 2013. And what we're really about is, A, how to balance sort of the humanitarian elements of how to make a great place with the utilitarian elements of how you kind of make sure that you have all of the logistics that you need to make a place function. So this is kind of a perfect type of project for us. The other part of the good news here, oh, am I in control of this? Oh, okay. The other part of the good news here is that a lot of what we think about are a lot of different scenarios in terms of what do you do if you have a lot of money, what do you do if you have kind of a lot of money, and what do you do if you have to be very scrappy and just work with the resources that you have. So the good news is we've given a lot of thought to sort of the long-term things that are going to require more investment. We've also given a lot of thought to things that might just require being scrappy and doing what you can in the meanwhile, so that you don't have to wait. Nobody likes a plan that sits on the shelf for 10 years and doesn't happen. So the idea of this is a lot of the recommendations that we're making here can be done immediately. That's okay. So I'll kind of go through the kind of idea. So first of all, this is we did work with an engineering firm on this to make sure that the ideas that we have are rooted in some type of reality. But this is a conceptual type of plan. So we tried to get some ideas, get some concepts that we thought were some pretty good design ideas. There's still going to be some need to actually make sure that the engineering makes sense. We did do some building by building assessments where we looked at each building and said maybe this is the frontage quality, this is the opportunity that we might have to, we might have some window permeability here. And this is, these are places where it might be kind of a blank wall, so there might not be a lot that we can do. Okay. Oh, okay. Do we all have this printed up? Okay, cool. We'll go through this one. So on the second page we have here, we have this small area reference map. What we did is we kind of looked through areas where we saw kind of a squeeze versus a release. So the squeeze means there's not a whole lot of room here. There's not a lot of room to be creative within the right-of-way. There may be room to be creative within the buildings, to have some ways that we might be able to interact better with the alleyway, but we don't have the opportunity to have a lot of room. These release areas were where we saw that, okay, there's a lot of room that we can play around with, and we may be able to do some more with the right-of-way here. So we came up with some ideas of what could be done with the right-of-way besides that. A caveat with this is that we've had some discussions about relocating or burying some of the utilities. That will change some of the dynamics, and that's one of the things that we're gonna have to look at as this very conceptual phase one starts to be rooted in reality. So we see here kind of on this third page here, we see, oh, here we go, good. We see kind of this core area here that we see as being the best couple of blocks with Catherine in the middle. And we're kind of showing a concept here. In this case, what we have is the idea of rerouting this into a one-way street. We came up with the idea of 16 feet. And as you can see here, there's a lot of space to have a more human element. So again, this is how do you take this thing that has to be a functional alleyway, that has to have all sorts of shipping, kind of receiving type of things, that has to have garbage trucks going through, that has to have a bunch of parking for people in the back, but still make it into a humane experience to the extent possible where people can walk through, where it's going to look good, where it's going to feel good. So how do you balance those two things? And as you can see from here, we pulled a lot of concepts over here. You see just some ideas that we got from other places, bioswales to help manage water, so that you can have what we call green infrastructure that manages the water naturally. The idea of having a market that's been brought up a lot, especially as it's a little bit hard to have activities on Moore because there's not a lot of sidewalk space. So can you have markets and can you have events more regularly in the back there? You see a vision of what we consider to be the best block, and again, this is just an idea, this is just a brainstorm, but it's based on some of the concepts, some of the discussions that we've had with people. And it shows you can have a 16-foot one-way and have some outdoor seating. You can have some of these building facades that are a little bit more engaging. You see the British Flight School Museum that has been proposed as the third building over there. And there's also a lot of opportunity to do things like have food trucks and have small vendors that may be able to come out there. One of the specific discussions that we had, and we had some conversations with the property owner as well. This is just a concept, but you see as one of these opportunity sites, you see Adelaide, where you have this, this empty space. As I think most of us here know, there was a concept to work with the existing building, and unfortunately the back of the existing building collapsed during the freeze that we had in this region. But so the idea is like this is a place to be seen, see and be seen, where you can be outdoors, where you have places for people, and one of several public spaces that has been at least discussed, or semi-public spaces that has been discussed within this concept. And if you go to the next slide, please. So this is one of the concepts that we had. We went to the developer, we had some conversations with them. There is gonna have to be some infrastructure in the back, for the utilities. But in this concept where the utilities are buried, this kind of shows one way to incorporate new parking, still have some dining in the back, and still have a place for people in the front. So you can imagine people could come in and play chess or have lawn games or have some seating and things that they do. This helps downtown be much more of a place for people, but it also kind of improves the visual pull of downtown. And if you have several of these in the front and in the back, people start to go, wait a minute, there's something happening here. Let's slow down and see this. And then just the idea of murals and public art. Just a side note of that, a lot of what you'll see as you read through this report is, you all have some very incredible murals here that you've really curated, that you've really thought through. That's a type of example of something that you can do with a very modest budget. If it's going to take a while maybe to make some of these larger infrastructure changes, I'm begging everybody, if you do murals, please make sure that they're of the same quality of what you already have, because you have a great asset already. So they're inexpensive compared to a lot of things, but they do cost money in order to do right. And same with the public art. We think that you have huge opportunities, more than maybe any other client I've worked with, to create some just visual pull that will help to change people's perception of the downtown. So that's just a concept. We also, another concept that we worked with was the gas station, Cowboy Station, which has shockingly good tacos. I say that as an Oak Cliff resident. But you know, is something that really is an automobile-oriented place that doesn't fit kind of the high quality of fabric in the downtown. So it could be an opportunity to do a lot of things. What we were asked to do is look at, okay, if this were used by the city, could you use this as parking, but still have it be a gateway that celebrates the community? So maybe people can come in and be able to be like, okay, I can park here, but this also creates some of those cues, and there's a public space here. This particular concept obviously is, again, just a rough concept that kind of shows a possibility that could be done, but this is also land banking. So if it turns out that you kind of have these several blocks that are the vibrant part of downtown, that's great, but since you haven't developed it, it could also become, you know, a multi-story building at some point. So we saw that as being a good balance and something that we could develop into more detail if needed. And these are just some examples of ways to use crossings, just to, again, give some cues. One of our clients, Grand Prairie, did this on their main street. That was, you know, another place that just needed some visual pep so that people knew they were in a special place. So that's some examples of what can be done there. South of the tracks, obviously we have not developed it as much as it's been developed by others here. So we'll just leave it to say that we think that there's opportunities to use that space as well, but we know that that's been given a lot more thought. We would emphasize that there's a lot of things that can be done temporarily at low cost. So if you're sitting here and, you know, there may be some delays, there's a lot of creative ways to think about the space south of the tracks and make this into a human-oriented space. And specifically, we have Brad Oldham sculptures. We're not trying to bring the Deep Ellum robot man into this particular community, but this is the same sculptor that did this. He has a relationship with Mr. Pina, who's the developer of the Adelaide site, and so we came up with some different, kind of discussed some different concepts that may be used either south of the tracks or on that site itself, so that, again, we think that the visual pull is very important here. We discussed a little bit Francis, this site over here. This is a potential gathering space. When we had some of the conversations about some of the infrastructure that would be needed to bury the utilities, it would take up a certain amount of this, but this is something that we could certainly work with a concept, and again, work within whatever the parameters are to help to create a really great space for people. And so, we had one of the things that was discussed was having the idea of a pop-up garden, again, thinking about what type of resources are available and how you can start to do things maybe temporarily, maybe semi-permanently, to build up to a more permanent space. And so just a little bit, this is obviously more reading materials than a traditional presentation, so we won't go through all of this, but I'll just kind of emphasize some of the things that are going to be there for reading materials. So we have, first of all, if you look down on the bottom of this page, we talk a little bit about investments and the fact that there's, for example, some money for this facade grant program. Normally the word facade is used for, the front of a building on the main street, but we're recommending thinking of it in the rear and thinking about all of these things, murals, facade improvements, gathering areas, storefront spruce ups, so a lot of these things that again can be very simple but can help to take steps while you're making these larger infrastructure decisions. If you go down, we did do a complete building database of all the buildings on that, I guess, 4-block stretch on both Moore and South Alley, and did an assessment that we think will be useful if you take a look at it, that kind of shows what buildings may have the most opportunities. Pop-up retail and business incubation. It's going to be challenging to fill up all of the buildings on Moore and on South Alley with very active, engaging uses. But you can take a lot of steps toward that, and we can talk about kind of how to do pop-up and temporary retail that can be strategies that can help to make things more permanent. A few cool businesses on South Alley would make a huge difference, and some of the businesses have some buildings that the rear may be opportunities to use in that way. And then, talking about, again, space activation, obviously the trains are a challenge, and that's especially true before the quiet zone is created, but it's even going to be true after that. We have seen examples of where that can actually be an asset. If you go in at the Firehouse Grand Prairie, where we help to pop it up, they have drink specials every time a train comes through. That would probably get people too drunk if you did it here in Terrell. But, again, thinking about just creative ways to...
That's thinking the Chris Basham way.
But thinking about these things that we may see as liabilities as potential assets or making lemonade out of it. One of the things that we discussed is there's a bunch of these kind of people who are trained aficionados. Is there a way you could have a schedule? There's a certain amount of people who, if you were to have some sort of viewing area, would geek out on it if you could say, hey, this is when the train is coming and it's carrying this. Wouldn't be how I'd spend my time, but I know people who are like that. So.
Rick, can I ask you,
Yeah.
flip back to the shot there of what's currently Cowboys. So that's corner of Virginia and 80. Keep going backwards there.
Yeah.
Gateway. Okay, so I have obligation to ask my board a question here.
Sure.
Okay, so the adjacent building there, no secret. One of the parking recommendations in the town square plan is for the city of Terrell to buy what's currently the Cowboys gas station. And we have made that offer, so we know that ball's rolling, and that's technically public information now. But please don't walk in and say, we're buying you out, right? So we use some discretion.
Well, we haven't made the offer yet, but
Initial notice letter has gone out. Anyway, my point here is, one of the goals is knock down Cowboys, and that exposes all of the building that's owned by Houston Smith. We have a long-standing discussion with Houston Smith going about putting a mural up of Fred Gray. So the history lesson here is Fred Gray was Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks' attorney during the Montgomery bus boycott. Fred Gray also famously won the class action lawsuit for the victims of the Tuskegee experiment, and he was the first African American to be the head of the American Bar Association. So, a lot of history there. How's he connected to Terrell? Well, he started his career partly by serving on the board of Southwestern Christian College. So he did a stint there, and he comes back to Terrell from time to time to present and stay involved in Southwestern Christian College. And so we think that one of the great ideas here is, as we clear Cowboys out of the way, it'll take us, as we said, all of 2022 to be working through that process. I always want to go a little faster than Charles is able to make us go. But my hope is that when you talk about, hey, what could we do that would show a real pop, right? We've got a landowner, Houston Smith, who's anxious to have the mural. We've recruited an individual by the name of Cedric Huckabee, who teaches at UT Arlington and is a Yale-trained painter and muralist. And he has agreed that he will go interview Fred Gray, because Fred Gray is still alive and wants to do this project. And Mr. Huckabee is willing to do this project as well. So we've got a muralist of some renown. We've got a perfect person to honor who's got Terrell connections and we've got a great wall to deal with it. We just have to get cowboys out of the way. I think we can line that up to be doing a mural honoring Fred Gray during our sesquicentennial. So remember, we turn 150 in 2023, and you can imagine that in the summer of 2023, we could have that an event where that mural gets installed. Well, how are we going to pay for that? Well, you guys are the crew to pay for facade improvements. So we're hoping that as we get our contract back from Mr. Huckabee, Allison Walker is kind of being the spearhead of this for us. We hope that as we get the price tag from Mr. Huckabee back, that we'll be able to bring that to you and say, hey guys, what does this look like? Is this a good project for us? So I want to kind of gauge interest there. Does that sound like the worst idea in the world? Does that sound like a good idea? As you're going to give him some response and questions, I want you thinking about that tangible idea as something we could do fairly quickly, okay? Yep. And there are questions for Rick?
As a comment to your comment, I think we do that at a minimum. I mean, we can paint a wall, absolutely, and that will be a great landmark that we could all be proud of, but that park is very enticing on that corner, something there, until we have a need for more parking. I mean, today, if you build it, they won't come in terms of parking. So I'd like to see personally something meaningful, like you've teased us with, go there.
The parking area, will we look at that as a short term or long term? Is it something that we need right away?
Well, I would say that it's part of this is how everything laces together, right? If I ask myself, do I need parking right there at Cowboys today? Well, obviously the answer is no. There's plenty of parking downtown right now today. When we put 26 new loft apartments in the Anderson building, we put 13 new hotel rooms in the Anderson building, and a restaurant in the Anderson building, and a restaurant in the Griffith building, we're gonna need parking, you know? So Mr. Pena would tell you, please don't have me make all of these investments without giving me someplace to park. So Charles is off trying to get the Union Pacific land because that would be good to park on. But I think that we are going to have some fairly near-term needs with parking at some of those corner locations. And so we'll just have to continue to be diligent about that. The advantage in the hotel parking issue is you can valet that. You can have the folks living in lofts be a little off, but you know, you need to be close. You can't be that far away. And so I would say that we'll have to push that forward expeditiously. You know, you just can't sit there and be blank, right? It needs to get moved forward. And like a lot of things we're going to encounter downtown, it's going to have to serve multiple purposes. I'm going to have to drive by it and say, wow, look at that mural. Wow, look at that entryway. All right, now I know I'm supposed to be here as a pedestrian, right? There's a signaling element here. Lots of what Rick just presented to you is the mental thing that you create when I'm driving along and I parked, and now I think I'm supposed to be here as a pedestrian. What feeling do you get on South Alley and Moore right now? I'm not supposed to be here. This is a place for cars, right? So just figuring that out is sort of his world of expertise, and that's why we really value this analysis he's done. But do I need to do parking right away? I need to do parking concurrent with opening a restaurant. And there's no other way to say it.
And
So,
Mike,
yeah.
I met with Pena this week, and good news, he's ready to go on that building, the park and the building. And one of the things I had to discuss with him is doing the lines, we're having to put a switch gear right there behind that area. And that takes up some of the parking he would have for that restaurant too. So it is a need for the near future. You know, the Anderson building is gonna take a little bit longer to move into, and that's where the hotel will be, but we're gonna need some parking around that corner for people to go.
Great comment, and I want to clarify that I I guess what I envision that I wouldn't be proud of is if we put this beautiful mural on the wall and then that lot looks like the corner of Adelaide, you know? So for it to be, beautiful, paved parking with a few ornamental welcome to downtown Terrell, I think we would be proud of that. A good point about needing the parking for both of those future developments.
And the Chisholm Trail mural in Fort Worth did okay for quite a few years as a parking lot before Fort Worth downtown evolved to the level where they were able to make, in this case, a fantastic public space out of it. So, it can be something where you can still have a parking lot and you be thoughtful about how you use it. That was also, in that case, in Sundance Square, if you all are familiar with it, that was also, they used it for, 150 events over a several-year period as well. So you can use those spaces that are used for parking creatively. We actually, it's kind of a segue into where we are in this part of it, because the one thing that we really gave thought to that was outside of the South Alley proper was parking, because we felt that it would start to become an issue very quickly. One of the things that I would urge everybody to think of with that is that you have to use a very comprehensive strategy, because there's not a silver bullet. I'm working for downtown Seguin right now. Downtown Seguin has a parking problem that's challenging people constantly, that everybody complains about. Downtown Seguin also has a parking garage that's half empty, that's like a block away from the core of downtown, more than half empty. It's never full, even in large events. I think that what I would encourage everyone to think is use a very comprehensive approach that also thinks about wayfinding, that also thinks about, working with downtown stakeholders to assess how they're using parking, managing it, having shared spaces. You have this facility, you have multiple banks that have parking lots that could be made very clear that people can use on evenings and weekends and so forth. So I think, it's like everything else, do the big things, but I think do the small things as well, and that's very important. And then we have kind of a note again just on facades, and we went through the code and made some specific recommendations, not a lot of them, but just kind of saying, okay, a lot of the rules that you have in the front, make sure that you have in the back as well. Yeah.
Before we move on, as we talk about the meeting all the needs that we're looking at, the parking needs, the mural, the history, all of it, as I'm listening to all of this, I'm thinking about the word narrative, and the narrative that we're trying to write with the change that we know is coming to the city of Terrell, that is coming to east of Dallas. And one of the things that I want all of us to keep in mind, our consultants, our community, is that our council has been looking to change the narrative within our own community and those that are outside of our community. So for our existing community, we're changing things as far as language. We're looking to not talk about north versus south, but trying to make sure that our entire community seems and feels like it's all one, whether it's the street or whether it's the welcoming aspect. So there are community members that don't perceive that they're as welcomed, whether you're on the north or south of the community. And I've also talked to new business owners in the community that don't necessarily feel welcome by other business owners. So it's change, and change is hard. So as we've been talking about downtown and the changes that are occurring in the community, I've been thinking about, well, what is it that we could add? Is it a statue? Is it looking at some of the examples you've provided, is it as simple as adding a welcome sign? Is it a mural, which is a great, I'd look forward to support that. But ways that we can tell our own community that we are welcoming. And I think about, something as simple as a sign already gives the impression to those here and outside that you are welcome in the city of Terrell. We want you to move here. We want you to visit. And then I also keep in mind that we are talking about what's in between Adelaide, Virginia, and Rockwall Street, but also planning to what happens if we extend our downtown beside that, and making sure that we keep that in mind in any, and this is for, you know, the rest of us, keep that in mind as we're looking to expend funds for something like a welcome sign.
Right.
So kind of prime months after dinner could be rather brutal. So is there any consideration to how to incorporate some type of shade to kind of make it more tolerable?
That's been something that we've discussed internally, and I think that as we go into the second phase, I think that looking into ways to create structure on either side of the South Alley right-of-way is a good question. These designs don't, there's elements of that in some of these that you'll notice, but they don't as strongly incorporate it as perhaps we could look at numbers for the actual alley itself.
I know a lot of municipal parks, a shade structure is kind of a requirement for any type of play structure.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment. Worst case, the trains will provide shade.
As they cruise them.
At least the breeze.
Yeah. I do want to say I love the mural idea because we've, have some wonderful ones up, but this one to me honors the diversity of our town. So I like that idea.
All right, anything else? Other questions, comments? Okay, yeah, I think we can, you're welcome, anyone's welcome to follow up with me if you have other questions or other things that you'd like us to look at from this report. So, okay, thank you everybody so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we're eager to hear about complete streets and quiet zones.
So on complete streets and quiet zones, recall that the city of Terrell asked very nicely that we could include funding for the preliminary elements of complete streets and quiet zones in the 2019 county bond program. So we've started spending that money on engineering. We have Kimberly Horn doing that work, and I'm going to let them just jump right on into it. Right now, it's county bond program funds for the engineering, and then at some point in the future, we will come to this board and we will ask for some help to create the local match necessary for federal grants to implement everything you're about to see. Nathan, take it away.
Well, President, Board, thank you very much, and thank you, Mike, for the introduction. I'm a civil engineer with Kimberly Horn, and it's always tough to follow planners, but I'll do my best. I've sprinkled in some nice pictures in here as well. First off, again, thank you. I think it's really exciting for all of these plans to kind of come together, and like Mike said, to stitch them together. And part of our focus over the last several months has been focused on the quiet zones, because I think those influence what we can do with the alley, and they also influence the plans for your town square. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. Talk about the progress, get specific on the railroad quiet zones, what we've done, what some of our initial recommendations and considerations are to make those quiet, complete streets, and then talk about where we're going next, and then really just open to discussion and your all's feedback. Again, I'm Nathan Ante. I've been with Kimberly Horn for 21 years Sunday. It's my 21st anniversary, and the really neat thing is the core team that we're working with, I've worked with my entire career. Tom Grant is traffic. He and I are sitting next to each other. He does a lot of work for TxDOT, specifically on complete streets. And And so he's a big part of the team. Also, Travis is working with the city on some other projects, but also he's spent his entire career working on DOT-type roadway projects. And then Scott Arnold's been our quiet zone expert, so he's been doing a lot of the work up front. And then we've also got Colette with JBJ. JBJ is a partner of ours that'll be really important moving forward in terms of public engagement and building consensus and working with y'all, getting to know council, the mayor, and also all the city staff and the business owners along the corridor. So I'll let Colette say a few things.
Good morning. Very excited to be here this morning and working with you and supporting Kinley Horn in the community engagement piece of this side of the project. One of the things at JBJ that we make sure that we serve the residents of the community. I love what your Mayor Pro Tem brought up. We make sure that we're getting your message out about all of this, but also that we're very carefully working with the residents to hear what they're saying and what they need. They live here, so we need to make sure that they are heard. And we've had 26 years techniques of doing that, so very excited to be part of all these changes. On a side note, I almost feel like I've become friends with Tori and Allison and Mike. I've fallen in love with your city. They took me on an amazing tour. I love your city so much. I was telling Allison in the hall that my husband is off of work today, so I made him drive me here so that he could see as we move into the next phase of our life. He's already texted me. He's found Griffin Avenue.
Griffith?
Griffin. The houses on there are beautiful. The town is like what we grew up in Ohio, so who knows? Maybe I'll be part of you someday. So just very happy to be here.
Recruiting new residents.
Yes.
I love it. Matthew's a realtor if you need
Great. Well, thanks, Colette. So real quick, what is a quiet zone and why are they important? It's really a zone along a railroad track that the horns wouldn't sound. So what that means is they're established by local government, so they're typically initiated by a city. So the city of Terrell would initiate that. They've got to be a half-mile in length. So you've got multiple crossings in the city within a half mile. So making one crossing quiet zone compliant will help, but it really needs to be a corridor. So we've broken this up into phases with a focus on downtown. And as downtowns are redeveloping and doing what y'all are doing, making the horns quiet is really important for future development. I think we all know that. I think to live and to work and to play in a downtown and not hear the horns is really important. But to do that, they've got to be compliant from a safety standpoint. And that is the process that we're working on now, and I'll show you a few snapshots on that. And then the railroad will certify that the planned improvements will meet the safety requirements, and then once those are established, the railroad will not sound the horns at those crossings. So we've been focused on the downtown area, and I'll show you what some considerations are for that. And then complete streets. I think you all may know what complete streets are, but this is a snapshot of the complete streets ordinance that was passed by the city on the definition of what a complete street is. And it's transportation infrastructure, in this case in the public right-of-way, that's designed, operated, and maintained to enable safe, accessible, comfortable, equitable, convenient access for all people and all users, including pedestrians. And I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, when some of these TxDOT type corridors were developed through downtowns, the traffic wasn't what it was now. And as traffic's increased, I think we all can acknowledge that it's loud, the sidewalks are narrow, there's not a ton of opportunity for that walkable amenity. So we're evaluating all the streets, considering that surrounding context of the historical component, but also the present component, and then also the future. A lot of the future improvements that are going on or will come on board. You know, designing a big thoroughfare with 4 lanes of traffic that are speeding through downtown, that doesn't lend well to the surrounding context. So it's almost doing a reset, evaluating the context, and taking a fresh look at what it could become. with the goal of developing a single unified approach to US 80, Spur 226, those are shown in red. Those are designated in red because those are DOT, TxDOT maintained and controlled, so those add a dynamic to it that is different than the blue streets. Those are city streets. You have a lot more flexibility and control over those, obviously. But also coordinating those with the railroad crossings and the South Alley to enhance the mobility, safety, and all the redevelopment opportunities in the area. So the progress that we've done to date, we started off in the summer. I know we started the scope development. We presented to y'all earlier this summer as we were getting started. What we've been doing in the fall is developing the quiet zone study in the downtown area, and I'll walk through those considerations and recommendations. And then we've also kicked off the scope development of the complete street study, which will be a big focus of what we do next year, or this year in 2022. So railroad quiet zones, this is very similar to a presentation we gave to council earlier or later last year, but just a big picture overview. There are 24 at-grade railroad crossings within the city. This initial quiet zone study is focused on the ones that are in the downtown area. And we're doing the study overall, but there are some improvements that are planned pretty quickly to be done at crossings right now. And the goal is to make those quiet compliant. They may not be quiet day one, but when they become part of the overall half-mile span at a minimum, they will already be compliant. You won't have to do anything above and beyond what's already planned at those crossings. So what are some of those? These are dictated by the railroad. So a couple options are 4-quadrant gate system. That means a gate on all 4 corners, so there's no way to circumvent the gates. That's one option. That's a lot of gates, and those are really expensive, a lot to maintain. Medians or channelization, like what you see on the left, is more common. A challenge with this is that it does create some access and circulation challenges that we'd want to work through as well. Conversion to one-way traffic, some cities are going to converting them to one-way, and then you don't need the four quad gate system, but that is also something that scores some safety points with the railroad that will make it quiet zone compliant. And then, of course, closing streets and driveways that you don't need a horn if they're closed, but anytime you close one, it's really, really hard to ever get another crossing back. So,
Nathan, quick question.
yeah.
I assume that the signalization still makes a loud noise to let you know a train's coming. Is this what I imagine?
Yeah, so we're doing a noise study too as well, and that you'll hear the horn, not the horn, you'll hear the train itself, but you'll hear the gates dinging, but it won't be the loud train horns. So again, this is your entire city. This phase 1 are the area that we're focused on now because they will influence what can be done on the alley and what we can do on the complete streets. And with each of these, this is a snapshot. This one's actually at Virginia. This is an example of what would need to be done at Virginia to make this one quiet. So the red, those are medians that are added. The yellow, those are additional signs, markings to get them up to standard. And then those green areas there, those are existing driveways that cannot be there. They would have to be modified. So obviously, a lot of discussions with the adjacent business owners would be needed for all of these crossings.
So I'm going to use this shot just real briefly to kind of get your mind thinking about resiliency. So one of the things that you have to realize about quiet zones is quiet zones are basically a mother may I to Washington, D.C. They're going to look at you every year, and they're going to say, did you keep it up? Are you still compliant? Are you doing the right thing? Da-da-da. We've seen cities lose their quiet zones. This is a major topic. We don't want to invest in this and have it go away. So one of the things that we're planning for is a moment that will happen in Terrell's future that we don't like, that we think of as a negative, but will be a thing that we can't stop. Eventually, and it could be 10 years from now, could be 30 years from now, Union Pacific will come forward and they will double track in downtown Terrell. They have methodically, since I've started my career in the early 90s, they've been methodically double tracking everything from Long Beach to Fort Worth, and then to Dallas, and then to Mesquite. They've spent billions of dollars doing it. It would be unrealistic of us to think that, well, they're just gonna stop, right? So that what they want is, here's the side that's eastbound, here's the side that's westbound, and nary the two shall meet. That's a safety project they've been working on for decades. So when will that come to downtown Terrell? I can't predict that, but I know that they've methodically done it to everybody to our west, okay? So when we plan this, what I'm asking the consultant team to do is to do the measurements about how big, how long these channel medians need to be, how many driveways do we need to take out, not for there's one railroad track, but for when there's two railroad tracks. And so all of our planning and investment is going to be geared to, well, make sure that when we build it, if they come in and they put a second track in there, we won't lose our quiet zone because they add that second track. So some of the distances that they'll be working on are being planned from that point of view. I just want to throw that little detail out for you, because a lot of this looks like, man, this is all good news. Well, part of it's bad news, right? There are other growth things happening, and there will be challenges and there will be difficulties. So anyway, just a little insert there.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Fascinating to me, and I hadn't thought about this, that that South Alley would be capped and traffic routed through what would be parking.
Yep.
That would cut down traffic.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's a really good point, and how this could influence the South Alley, and that's why we did want to get this done, make this a priority, because the alley is very close to the railroad, and creating those medians between the two. You can keep the alley, but once you exit out the alley, you got to go right. You can't go across in some locations. And so that's where I think our next step is to work with Mike and Steve and Rick as well.
And fair to say, the same would be true at the Rockwall intersection, where we don't own that lot, but we'd have to get creative with that.
Again, under the heading of poorly kept secret, we do, the battle plan for the town square is to purchase the lot that we don't own, that we always put Christmas lights on at the corner of Rockwall and the railroad tracks, Rockwall and Moore. So that takes a lot of special attention, because that part of the South Alley is technically already too close to the railroad tracks. They think of us as encroaching there. So we will have to do a lot of creative thinking about how to get South Alley turned back up and not have an intersection too close to the railroad tracks there. So that's another layer of difficulty in this. Yeah.
So some of our initial considerations, recommendations, we've talked about a lot of them, is that many of those 12 crossings within downtown would include raised concrete medians, signing and striping, and sidewalks. And anticipate closures of one or two. Could be possible. Delphine's an example of one that would lend itself to be a closure. A quad gate system would be necessary at the Bowser crossing in front of the college. You all know that entrance is very close to the railroad. There's not enough space to get the median in there, so a quad gate system would be necessary there without a reconfiguration of that entrance. Alley connections, we talked about that at Rockwall and Virginia, would need to be modified or removed, and the alley connections at those other streets would be right in, right out. And then some driveways, like we saw on the Virginia example, need to be modified, particularly along Virginia. So the length of that median is dictated by the railroad, so that's what's driving that. I'm going to switch gears real quick and talk real briefly about complete streets. This is a graphic of some of the existing challenges that I know y'all have, the ADA, the steps, the existing utilities. You've got parking that's not used. I think we talked a lot about parking. Some of it's used, but until the uses really pick up, that could change. The railroad crossing, lots going on along the corridor. I've got Mike said include a couple of pictures. I included a lot. I'll just touch on these really briefly, but these are really exciting. These are really cool. These are examples of some renderings. Some of them are built now, but these are just some examples of complete streets that prioritize more than just the vehicle, which is what some of these TxDOT corridors, their main priority was the vehicle, and that's changing. That top example, left example is in Richardson, Main Street. That project's done. They've implemented that. We designed that. You'll notice to address the tree issue, all those green circles, those are, or the shade issue, those are shade. Shade was a priority. Widen the sidewalks, narrowed the lanes, really cool, and working on the next phase of that one. These are just some other examples you'll see in the bottom left. This one's got like a bike, prioritizing bicyclists, widening the sidewalks so you can have street cafes. See a lot of shade on those with some awnings and also the trees. Really transforms the whole corridor.
Nathan, did,
Yeah.
oh, you're about to hit it. I was gonna ask if Kimley Horn did the Lewisville Complete Streets project. Mike challenged us over the break to go see Lewisville, and I know at least 2 of the rule followers here did that for fear of being shamed.
I got
Yeah.
photographs from Hillary.
Okay, good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I was blown away. If you haven't been, it helps so much. Pictures don't do it justice of how it has changed that downtown landscape. My dad was a Lewisville fireman for 20 years, so I had been to downtown Lewisville before. It was completely forgettable before.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, reminded me a lot of Terrell. And so you've got to go see it because the creativity used in creating these complete streets is nothing that my banker brain could have ever imagined.
Yeah, yeah. It really is amazing. That whole downtown has transformed over the years. That's the top left. The bottom left is Grapevine. I know y'all are probably familiar with Grapevine. They went through a transformation many, many years ago, and it's a really good example of it's a really tight corridor. The building to building is narrower than what you all have out here. They have very limited real estate, but they made it work. They've got sidewalks, they've got a lot of amenities. It's a really vibrant, great downtown. I think one thing, just full disclosure, it is not a major north-south route like y'all have out here, a big east-west route. So they didn't have the traffic challenges, but even during the holidays, you know, they've got narrow sidewalks, some places way narrower than what you have today. They also have parking out there. So what they do during the holidays is they barricade off the parking a lot of times in front of some of their gazebo and areas to accommodate some more places for people. But sidewalks are always crowded.
Grapevine and Lewisville, neither of those is a TxDOT roadway, is that correct? So that's a whole nother.
Very different, yep, yeah.
The Lewisville Main Street is a farm to market road. That is a TxDOT FM, yeah.
Okay.
That part, yes.
Okay.
This is a really neat story. This is downtown Duncanville. This was a project that we did back in the early to mid 2000s. It was built during the recession time, but this picture on the left shows a county road, lots of gray, lots of pavement, very narrow sidewalks. They wanted to change the downtown. So this other picture, you'll notice on the left, that big county road, we took a lane off of the county road, narrowed that lane to allow for more organized parking, which gave more streetscape amenities, but we were also able to widen sidewalks that were anywhere from 4 to 6 feet to 15 feet wide, and also fix all the ADA issues that were fronting those buildings. And this was actually a partnership through the COG as well. So really cool project, really transformed that downtown. And a couple other before and after pictures. The one on the right is Roanoke. If y'all haven't been to Roanoke, that's a really neat redevelopment area. And then last graphic is this shows there are a lot of competing priorities within these tight right-of-ways, and you'll see the awnings and the trees could provide some shade, but there are different zones that we'll be talking about throughout the process as well.
to sit down there, and I want to be able to drink a cup of coffee out there. I've got a throughway zone, which is, and I'll tell you who does this great, is Toronto. There's some streets in Toronto where they do a really good job of, yeah, I have a defined frontage, I'm sitting. I have throughway, because there's a ton of people walking back and forth. And then I get what they're calling furnishings and edge over here, where I create something where it seems like that's my boundary. If you don't give your pedestrian a boundary, then they're gonna be scared. And that's part of the problem in our downtown on Moore Avenue, right? And suddenly I'm blanking on the city, so pardon me for that. But there's a city that I toured recently in Central Texas where they're pumping just as many cars every day through their farm to market on their major road in going through downtown. They have as small and narrow as our sidewalks. But what do they have? Every 15 feet, there's a 60-year-old oak tree. And everybody feels comfortable because they know those giant oak trees are protecting them, right? And, so distance is space. You got to have a sense of boundary, and that's what these guys are going to be really tasked with doing correctly, is what's my sense of boundary between me and that vehicle? And if we don't get that right, then it won't be a good pedestrian environment. So that's a more important graphic than just initially pops out to you.
And these similar type graphics are what we will be developing for your all's corridor in different zones, and I'll show you another graphic here in a minute on how that could change block by block. So as we're working through the complete streets, there's a lot to consider, and this is going to be where we really work through the details throughout this year. Quiet zones, we're getting that behind us. We're understanding those implications. Public input, Colette and team will be a big part of that. That's a big part of developing complete streets. It's a different approach to designing roadways where wasn't the case 20, 30 years ago when roadways were built initially. Considering TxDOT, the county, the railroad, and all the COG partners, it's like y'all have mentioned, it costs a lot of money to do this. So having partners on board and build that consensus along the way so that at the end of this, we've got a solid implementable plan that can be pieced together over time. Traffic analysis, a big component. The corridor carries a lot of traffic. We've got to address that. The ongoing projects and effort, got to consider that, obviously. The various context zones. I've got one more slide after this that I'll show you what I mean by that. And then various street options and considerations, and I'll specifically touch on US 80. Number of different scenarios. I know we are building off of the capital work plan that y'all were a big part of, the downtown master plan that identified some of these typical sections, but a one-way couplet. That means converting US 80 to one-way to provide more space for all these other amenities that are really important to change the sense of place through that area. Eliminating the left turn lanes and or the medians. That provides another 12 to 14 feet of usable space that could be allocated towards sidewalks or furnishing zones or anything else. Reducing the lane widths or removing lanes. Do you really need 2 lanes in each direction through there? Reducing or eliminating the parallel parking. We're working with the city of Frisco right now. For those of y'all that haven't been through downtown Frisco, they went through a lot of improvements 20 years ago to improve the sidewalks, add parking, but over time, as you can imagine, in the last 20 years, Frisco's grown. The traffic is pretty significant, and they're having very similar challenges where the traffic is taking priority at the detriment to the surrounding context. So their approach through a complete streets context-sensitive process was to eliminate all the parallel parking to provide much greater sidewalks. So that comes at a cost. Parking's a priority as things redevelop. So they're also making commitments to allocate parking lots, redoing adjacent streets to provide parking, improving the sidewalks so that you can walk. Right now, parking's a problem because there aren't any sidewalks to those parking lots. So all that will work through. And then, of course, costing and funding And then implementation and phasing. What are the priorities? What needs to come first is something that we'll work with y'all and the stakeholders to determine. So real quick on just complete streets, the context zones. This is the entryways at either end at Bowser Circle and Bird Street. Those are opportunities to build some of those welcome signs, to create that sense of community, to great opportunities there. Same thing on the south end. And then we're identifying that core zone. Where we're at now is the downtown area. That typical section and what takes priority may be different than what takes priority on the commercial transition zones. Same thing along Virginia as well. So for each of these zones, there'll be various typical sections that will ultimately arrive at what we propose to do. So next steps, we're gonna build off those efforts that we've done to date, including the downtown plan that KSA was a big part of, the complete streets policy, and the capital work plan that y'all were a big part of. Build off the downtown quiet zone study considerations and recommendations, package that up and present that to council and work with staff to get that moving. Finalize the complete street scoping so we can move forward with that, and then engage the public. That's a really big part of it. And so that in 2023 and beyond, it can start to be implemented.
So what are you most likely to see next? This is where JBJ will come in here soon. We're trying to plan out a downtown town hall meeting so that we can really start getting the public more involved in the project. We'll feature different elements of all three of these projects that you heard about today. If you ask me what day we're going to do that town hall meeting, I'm going to hedge because I want to get a little bit more input from our land acquisition and from all the consultant team about when they can do it. But I'd like to be able to do a town hall in March and show the public a little bit more of what we've got going here. That's an important part of it. And then another task that Nathan is tasked with is making sure that we have a project committee that involves TxDOT and the North Central Texas Council of Governments, because I've got to get the Regional Transportation Council involved on the ground floor so they can be comfortable with what kind of grant they're going to provide to us. And I'll just also kind of cap my remarks off by saying I'm going to give you one spot, and every spot that's covered by his study and by Chris Basham's and by Rick's and all of that, they all have this flavor to them. Imagine standing at the corner of Catherine and the South Alley. In order for the corner of Catherine and the South Alley to work correctly, then when I look south, I gotta have a safe, quiet zone crossing. I gotta be able to walk as a pedestrian to the town square. I've gotta be able to drive a car and a delivery truck. I've gotta be able to move a sanitation pickup vehicle, right? I've got to make sure that when I turn and look one way, I've got a great place to walk to the British Museum. If I turn and walk the other way, I want to be able to go to Louis Pena's new restaurant. I want to make sure that the intersection of Catherine and US 80 is an attractive place that I want to be at. So just about every place put yourself, you've got to make sure that all the details got done right. So I started off with, hey, we have a lot of details to work through. I'm going to end with, hey, we've got a lot of details to work through, and I don't want to build anything and then rip it up because we got the details wrong. So that's what we're working on, and making sure all these guys coordinate, and we'll have you guys along for the whole process. And whenever you see something and you say, oh, I hate that idea, don't do that, we're going to take it to heart. And whenever you see something and say, yes, I like that idea, incorporate that one, that's something we want to take to heart. So you guys just keep giving us input, and we'll get this project done for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Mike, real quick, this is kind of part question and part recommendation. Would it be possible for us to have, and maybe downtown Lewisville already had, maybe their Chamber of Commerce has already created something like this, but would it be possible for us to get some sort of like walkthrough or drone video footage of what that one-way couplet looks like, and specifically the pull-in parking leading to this, I call it squeeze chutes, I'm sure there's a better engine
Yeah,
but when you see it, it's so much different than when you just talk about it.
right.
So my strong recommendation would be before we take it to a town hall type thing, that we have some kind of visual so people can understand how that all works. Because when you see it in person, it's just completely.
We'll take that recommendation to heart. I think you're exactly right. Walking it, driving it, seeing it, it makes such a difference. So we'll do our best to get good visuals for the town hall meeting, absolutely. Other comments or questions?
No, I agree with Hillary. Our whole society has, you can't show them a picture anymore. So when we're doing a presentation, you gotta make it where it's gonna keep their interest. It's gotta move, literally. So I do believe they immediately go, oh, yeah, I see that, as opposed to, like, even us looking at the picture, I understand what you're doing, but I'm kind of going, okay, and then how does that, and then.
How does that apply
Yeah.
out here?
Yeah.
That's pretty easy to do to overlay.
Very good.
Comment for Colette. I want us to get creative in how we engage the community this time. We've all served on those committees before, and it's the same people every time, and our town has changed. And I think there's a lot of people like yourself on the cusp of wanting to live here. We don't have housing for them right now, that's no secret. But if we can engage more of our teachers or business owners, you know, people that don't necessarily live here today in this conversation, I hope it will continue to spark or, you know, magnify the excitement that the ones that have been here for generations are feeling. So we can help you with names, we can help you with, you know, anything you want with that, but I think it's imperative for this next step.
And you've already been very helpful with names and all the people that we've talked to. One thing about our team, too, that I don't know that we've talked about, we're so diverse as far as age, ethnicity, language. So I think I probably need to talk a little bit more with you about what team you actually want here on the streets, spreading the word. So I don't know if you want me to talk to you, Mike, or you.
Sure, both.
Again, I think it's gotta be on demand. You know, it's great to set up public meetings, and it's great to have, I sat in every park plan meeting we had, attended every master plan thing I think we had. Looked around, and my parents were there at every meeting. I mean, the same people were at every meeting, but we did not get what I consider the majority.
Well, I'll tell
Outline
you
community.
flat out, part of the point in hiring JBJ here is that they have the capability of being I'm just gonna knock on your door, because you're a business owner who's never come to the meeting, and I'm gonna
But it's
say
very
hello
vocal.
and introduce myself, and sometimes you need to do that in Spanish, sometimes you need to do that with, you know, a diverse cast of characters, because we got a diverse cast of characters from Bowser to Birch, going down Virginia, the town square area, all of it. That's as diverse as it gets. And so I think if you go take a look at JBJ's website, you'll find that I think we've got the right partner here. I will also say about JBJ is that they're also doing our quality of life audit, and so that gives them another kind of view of what's going on in Terrell, and is giving them some folks to talk to that will be very helpful in this process as well. I'm kind of nervous about the results of my quality of life audit. I'm sure they're coming forward soon, and there may be some negative in there, and that's okay. That's why we hired them to do the quality of life audit. So yeah, very good message. We'll absolutely be doing that.
One thing I did do, if you want me to leave it with any of you, I have like 5 or 6 copies of a very broad overview of our capabilities and what we can do and what I had presented to Nathan that we could do to support them. So I can leave those copies with you if you'd like.
Thank you.
Because when we were originally doing the master plan and everything, and hearing from business, I'm not a business owner, but I grew up in this town, moved away, came back. They were even at a point right then, they didn't go up against the pandemic, so I would and they didn't have crosswords competing with them. So I would imagine their fears and concerns are even more height than you know, and to talk about messing with even though to me, I think the outcome is gonna be so much wonderful for them. if you're trying to survive, how that's going to impact your current outlook, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And this might sound, and I hate to keep interrupting, this might sound kind of silly almost, but I truly believe that our staff has the heart to be face-to-face with those people and make sure that they're being heard, and that they're being heard the way they want to be heard.
Okay.
So I would certainly encourage that if you have names or organizations that you would love for JBJ management to speak to, send those over to Mike so he can gather those and provide to JBJ management. And you know what JBJ management did it. I knew about JBJ's management before I knew they were JBJ because of all the innovative ideas and ways that they reach members in, as an example, in Dallas County, and even during the pandemic and all the outreach that they've done there. So I think as a council member, I feel confident in the work that they'll do. But I think I'd certainly encourage us to still provide any names and organizations and different ways of doing things. I was talking to Mike recently, and one of the things that I heard that a community up in the Northeast area was doing to try to get those that maybe don't come out to a meeting because maybe that's not what they enjoy.
They don't drive it. They don't drive at night, and you have the meetings at night.
They don't drive at night, or you're trying to pull in, like maybe the millennial generation was that they hosted a tailgate party. I'm not going to say they gave alcohol or things of that sort, but they were trying to be creative and the ways that they outreach individuals that don't normally want to come and spend an hour or two at a meeting.
Last thing I'll say, I promise, and I love that you brought that up, but we were hired by Dallas County for the census to do the hard to count. So those are people who did not want to be on anyone's radar. And we engaged them to the point, and I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, that they were counted for the first, that population was counted in the census for the first time ever. And we did creative things like going to barber shops and obviously churches, but just we did it. And so I appreciate the vote of confidence.
Thank you. I'm not sure we have any action to take. Charles, do we have anything for executive session that needs to be discussed? Okay. If I had my way, we would meet every week and we would be voting on things and spending money. But this is refreshing to know that there's been so much work happening behind the scenes, which we all knew, but it's great to see the results of that. So thank all of our guests for being here and showing us what you've been working on. Okay. Oh.
I think Charles could give you a 1-minute facade.
Say it again?
Wrap up.
Okay. Oh, good.
Yeah, 58 seconds. Yeah.
Before we leave quiet zones, I do want to say, as I look at who all's here, I think we all, at some point in our lives, we used to watch movies at the Iris Theater in downtown. All of us are from Terrell, grew up here. And if you've never watched a movie that backs up to a railroad crossing, yes, you just haven't lived. And so the idea that one day we can eat dinner or watch a movie in downtown Terrell and not have that experience is exciting. So thank you for bringing that to life. Charles?
Anybody want to start the clock? Okay. No, really, we're just in the process of talking. Mark Thacker's is still working a few projects out. We just, Mr. Smith just finished his project, and you voted on that last time. So we just finished giving finance all the stuff that they needed. It took about a month or two, but he got his paid. He did a really good job. I was very excited about it. He's a great guy. Should be get involved here. We met with French Foray. Christina there, she wants to do a lot of stuff up in her building. She hosts weddings and the receptions now, but she has to have some things set up downstairs, and she does her stuff upstairs. They have to come down and move things around just to have the way the building's being used. And so we looked at that from a standpoint of the north-facing alley to redo her facade there and open it up with windows. and then the little metal area where the coffee shop was, and redoing that facade. But we also looked, Mark Thacker and I and Christine, we also walked so he could take a look at it. And as you know, things, we were hoping for easy, but right now Mark is engaging in a structural engineer, and I'm working with him to do that. So the cost is not on her at this point until we decide if we're gonna do it or not. Mr. Lindsey Taylor, I don't know how many of y'all have really looked at what he's been doing. What's that?
Taylor Lindsay.
Taylor Lindsay, excuse me. Anyway, the Southland building, I gave, Mark has worked with him for about 15 hours on doing renderings and changing up things. I was in the building with him about a month and a half ago, and I love what he's doing. That building is so cool, and if you ever get a chance, contact him. And he's, by the way, owns a masonry company, so he's general contracting a lot of his stuff. So I'll be bringing back some stuff for him because he's gonna be redoing that whole inside too. And so spending that time on the outside is a big deal. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
If nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, JC. Second by leaving.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody coming and